The Giver, Societal Norms, Vulnerability, and Courage by Mason Zimmerman. The Giver. The Giver's world reflects on our world with societal norms. In the book The Giver, the world is colorless and without a sense of individualism and emotional expression. In The Giver, a world where nothing was ever unexpected or inconvenient or unusual. The life without color, pain, or past. In other words, The Giver is a place where society pressures you into no emotional identity or emotional expression. The idea of a colorless world represents a world where everyone is the same with no sense of individualism, and everyone just follows society. The book The Giver by Lois Lowry, a dystopian world without emotion, reflects on our world by societal norms, no vulnerability, and misconceptions of courage. On societal norms, Marcus Thompson II, who wrote the article about Simone Biles in the stimulus package, wrote that the public's perception of Simone Biles quitting due to mental health issues, and he identified that Simone Biles knew she was bucking against the ingrained culture and the condemnation would come because she's dealt with this dynamic her whole career. Simone Biles knew the backlash that she would get after quitting because this was against societal norms at the time. This also shows that athletes and professionals are held to a higher standard than the rest of society by the public. And this is to show all the hate she got over time just after she quit due to mental health issues, which obviously all this hate probably worsened her mental health state. 2. Vulnerability. Simone Biles' story also relates to a more present story about a rower named Maggie Barra, because Barra was depressed. Her parents could tell by her grades, but her teachers, her coaches, and friends couldn't tell at all. And that was the worst part, isolated from her team because of her injury. Barra didn't know anyone at UNC well enough to share what she was going through. She felt miserable and invisible. This quote furthers the idea of mental health issues in athletes and how they feel. They have no one to express their emotions to. This furthers the idea that athletes are held to higher standards. According to Vicki Lackman, an author with a PhD on mental health, that professionals suffer from mental health problems, which leads to a state of vulnerability. This proves all professionals can become emotionally vulnerable, but many stay silent due to the stigma for society. Misconceptions of courage. According to Judith Jordan, an expert in sociology, who found that courage is ordinarily depicted as a characteristic of the lone, separate person who defies vulnerability and fear. In a paper written in 1990, I suggested that courage, unlike macho defiance of fear, is the capacity to act meaningful and with integrity in the face of acknowledged vulnerability. There is no real courage where vulnerability and fear are denied. I think this is a great definition of courage, because courage is expressing your vulnerability and overcoming your vulnerability. Counter. Someone with an opposing view on this topic may say vulnerability is a weakness. For example, Washington University in St. Louis found that Webster's Universal College Dictionary defines the word vulnerable in 5 ways. We will list 3. Capable of or susceptible to being wounded or hurt physically or emotionally. Susceptible to temptation or corrupt influence. 3. Open to or defenseless against criticism or moral attack. These definitions use words capable of, susceptible to, defenseless against, weakness, and disadvantage. This suggests that vulnerability is a weakness. However, since this definition of vulnerability is in one of the most used dictionaries in the world, this definition is what many people think of vulnerability. My rebuttal. This quote from Marcus Thompson II defines courage differently, with the real definition of vulnerability being, I know this nuance of courage, this part that requires looking at yourself and having that hard conversation. I can't do it. I am overwhelmed. I do need help. I am falling. I'm not as together as I portray. Mirrors can make formidable opponents. It's more difficult now to declare insufficiency than ever. To me, this quote is the real definition of courage. Recognizing your vulnerabilities, and that takes the most courage. In today's world, you're just told to suck it up and act tough due to societal norms. But overcoming that takes the most courage. Conclusion. Overall, it takes a great deal of courage to express vulnerability and overcome it. Societal norms frown on vulnerability. They call it a weakness, but really, vulnerability leads to growth instead of being a weakness, and leads to strength. That's it.
Do you have a bibliography slide?
Oh,
You probably want to create